in life, to grasp these kind of things, because they're, otherwise not receiving it from anywhere today, right? They don't really, of course, get good intellectual education from schools, but elsewhere, the kind of spiritual education is missing. So our world is tragically different. It's a world of conflict, and I don't need to go into that. We're very well aware of it, perhaps in recent years more so, because I think if you're like me, we had a strong feeling of hope that entering the 21st century, we're moving into an era of greater peace and stability, but it seems that the underlying problems have not been resolved yet. They're coming to the surface in order, I feel, to be part of the solution or part of the resolution and help us to learn, but it's a painful process that's going on in many parts of the world. The unification principle here talks about our two purposes in life, and here's the founder, Father Moon. Here he is talking about that. He says we have two purposes in our life. One is the purpose of our own lives, and the other is the purpose of our lives in relation to others. And we talked quite a bit earlier about that kind of relationship aspect. So, yes, we have our own life and my mind and body. We have to look after myself, but we are always in relation to other people. So this is to our family, our nation, or the whole world. And there must be balance between those two purposes. If too much stress is placed on individualism, then collective virtues are lost. That means love of the nation, brotherhood of the people, family integrity, relationships between parents and children, and finally, even through that, the value of the individuals themselves. It's a kind of unwinding, as I think about it now, of the process that we talked about as being so beneficial in making those three foundations of peace. It's going the opposite way if we focus on ourselves too much. And, it's hard to know what is the guiding philosophy of, say, the United Kingdom at this particular time in history. But I think a fairly reasonable definition is its self-centered individualism. That's very strong. And that is certainly not the only way of living or the way that we should live. So we need to rethink in that way and have a powerful kind of movement to become more altruistic and more concerned for others. Peace comes about through the process of living, really, for the sake of others. If we live for the sake of others, that's putting that pair system and those relationships we talked about earlier into practice. So I exist, I can say, to benefit the whole, which is, connected to that higher purpose that we identified. So here is an individual. It could be me, it could be you. You're part of a whole. You're within that whole. And if you're living for the sake of the whole, then it's natural that the whole actually comes to support that individual. So the individual lives for the whole purpose, and the whole then supports the individual. Perhaps you can think about it as, if you have a circle of 10 friends. Is that a lot? I don't know. 10 friends. And you're a person who really thinks of them and always is remembering them and thinking of something that would be good for them, and you call them up and you help them, and if they need something, you're there. So you become that kind of person in their lives. When you are in difficulty, don't you think they would respond to support you and to help you? It's a natural kind of process there. If people have the heart to appreciate you in those circumstances, they're going to have a heart to help you should you be the one in need. So this is a kind of small version of what should happen in society as a whole. The reality sometimes, and the cause of conflicts, is that I become self-centered. That means having less regard for that higher purpose, and it's more focused on me. So even to the point that I can think, well, others exist really for my benefit, or they should do, and the government should exist for my benefit, and everything that happens should be there to help and support me. So it's diminishing or even ignoring the value of the whole, and it's almost like I'm apart from that whole and seeking to be supported in that way. Maybe that's very simplistic, but does it get the point across? This kind of diagrams. And, there are ideologies that we are still kind of encountering and have, lived through with the 20th century that have justified and even encouraged conflict. It's at the base of Marxism to encourage conflict between groups, thinking that that will produce something of greater value. But that's not what we established in our first talk, was it? It's this, common kind of good relationship between subject and object, a harmonious and a complementary relationship centered on shared values, which is going to make progress and produce something greater. So there's a misguided element in many of in these materialistic and atheistic ideologies like Marxist-Leninism that have dominated the scene, especially in the 20th century. So here's Father Moon again in the 70s, because a lot of his work was focused on applying these principles to a critique and counter-proposal to communism, which he did very thoroughly, Do you think you make enemies that way? Yeah, you can make a lot of enemies that way, right? And still we're, as a movement, suffering from that false, information and media nonsense and all this kind of thing. But behind it often is a strong kind of desire to try to eliminate the work we're doing because it's ideologically opposed and exposes the fallacies of such an ideology like communism. Here's Father Moon. According to the logic of communism, there will be constant struggles as long as there are classes of people. And you notice the tendency in our current society to divide up people more and more. And this is promoting these kind of struggles and difficulties. In our ideology, that means UPF ideology, there are no class differences, but only family relationships. It comes back to family relationships, how we should relate together. Here, there is no discrimination. There are no people above or below, but only the relationship between parents and children, which provides order in the family. So we need order, but we don't need discrimination. So here again is his view. According to communist ideology, mine is mine and yours is mine. On our part, we must think, mine is yours, and yours is the nations, and the nations is the world's, and the world's is God's, and God's is mine. So the whole is supporting the individual in that way. This is how it works out in practice. It's a different way of orienting our thinking. And the spirit of unification must be greater than the power of communism in practice, in hope, and in ideals. So the reality of the human nature, and I know it's a bit of a heavy subject after lunch, isn't it, right? You want to kind of relax in front of the telly, but you've got me. Oh dear. So, but anyway, it's necessary to talk about these things. So I admire you. This is talking about the reality of what we call human nature. Often if somebody behaves very in a greedy or self-centered way, we might say, oh, that's just human nature. Have you heard it used that way? But this unification principle would say, no, that's not original human nature. That's not how we should be, right? But it might be the kind of reality that we experience. There's a selfish nature which is kind of very well developed in each person, but every person has an original nature. So even if you have quite a problematic individual, you can still rather in joining in the kind of give and take based on their animosity or their resentment or their, lack of caring, you can speak to their original nature, their original mind, and you'll find that even quite a problematic person, there's something in them which is like of this original nature. You can talk about their love for their mother, maybe, or something like that, and then they'll start to change completely, right? When talking about something which is more genuine. But this original nature in many people is undeveloped. In all of you, I'm sure it's very developed, right? This original nature. That's why you're here, right? It attracts you. That's why it's a kind of interesting magnet. And we have some wonderful magnets like Margaret and David and Patricia and people who are, isn't it interesting? The people that kind of come to the meetings they organize are people that you're very interested to meet and get on with, right? So it's an interesting phenomenon, really, which is taking place. So we have a conflicted self. We have some kind of problem inside ourselves. Are you aware of that? Or is it just me, right? So, selfishness or just kind of more self-interested desires, and then kind of more altruistic thinking where I'm thinking, no, I shouldn't be doing that. My conscience is telling me something different. This is it's the very stuff of religion everywhere, actually, to deal with this problem. And that's why we need it, because it's a reality, but it's not how things should be. The fact that we talk about it that way already reveals that it's not how it should be. Look at some of some world religious traditions and what they say about this conflicted self. Here's Sikhism from the Adi Granth. It says, whoever proclaims himself good, no, goodness approaches him not. Always rather poetic language in these, scriptural texts. But it's very beautiful. Yes, that's true. As soon as you start to think, well, I'm fine. It's everybody else who has the problem, right? Actually, maybe goodness is not approaching you. In Hinduism, in the Maitreya Upanishad, it said the mind is twofold. The pure and also the impure. The mind is twofold. And in Native American religion, of Mohawk tradition, every person has both a bad heart and a good heart. Very simply but accurately put, isn't it? In Christianity, you have in his letters, like letter to the Romans, Paul is the kind of, in a way, like an active, sometimes considered founder of Christianity as a religion, that first missionary going around the Mediterranean. Then he talks about his inner struggle. We don't know quite what it is. It doesn't specify it, but he says, I do not do the good that I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do, right? Wretched man that I am, he says, who shall deliver me from this body of death? And you're thinking, well, this is a saint talking, right? I don't think he was so bad, but for himself, there was some kind of conflict inside or limitation. Maybe he wanted, trying hard to love certain people, but he couldn't love them. And then it was annoying him, this kind of feeling. And actually, the more a person pursues a prayerful and kind of saintly path, like I've talked with many monks and nuns, and they find that their life of prayer is like taking off layers of themselves, like an onion, So, once they take off one layer, maybe they're thinking, I'm doing quite well in the spiritual life. But then you go a little bit deeper and you realize, no, there's something which is blocking me. There's some barrier between myself and experiencing God or the divine. And what is it, And they go through some kind of agony and confusion. And then they need some help from a wiser and elder person. And then they overcome and that layer is gone, right? But then they meet the next. Right? So this is a kind of human experience, really. So there's a conflict in the mind. And then I searched the internet for the most conflicted-looking person that I could. How did I do? Is it all right? So drawn towards evil with kind of selfish thoughts or words, actions, where the body is immediately dominating, should I go and help this person, or shall I, get an early dinner or something and sit down in front of let's do that. This kind of desire, isn't it? And that's something we all recognize. But there's also something inside us, a conscience, some kind of pull towards goodness, unselfish thoughts, words, and actions. This is what we call your original mind, which is leading. It's just a term, so if it's new to you, you'll kind of catch what that means. We have more of a fallen mind and more of an original mind. But there's a battle going on in the mind, right? We talk about it as a mind-body problem because, often the kind of self-centered desires come through the body or associated with that, with our physical comforts or needs. But really, it's all in the mind, right? So this is the human condition, and so much of genuine religious path is to identify this and help us get over this, right? So we need various means to do that. So there's a battle in the mind of each person. It's that inner battle which gets manifested in problems and conflicts in the family. This is where the kind of feeling of anger or, fighting with somebody or disagreeing and at odds with somebody, this is where it's coming from, my own confusion, really. And that manifests in society and in the world, often with even groups of nations opposed to each other. So this origin of conflict, and one reason as a resource to go back to our age-old religious traditions, is because they contain many clues, often in the form of myths, which are containing deep insights and intuition about this human condition, many times metaphorical stories, but surprisingly universal, right? Shall we look at some of them? Here's from Jainism in the Uttaranga Sutra. It says, it is better to die than to indulge in partaking of forbidden lustful pleasure. Well, that's pretty strong, isn't it? Right? I said, I'll give you a little warning for this after lunch lecture. But so we're looking here really and identifying how many of these talk about a problem in the area of love, especially sexual immorality, and the strong forces which pull a person in different ways and to different directions in this area. We call it the misuse of love. In the Dhammapada, it says there, this is a Buddhist scripture, the man who goes to the wife of another digs up the very roots of life. In other words, going the way of adultery. Here in the Holy Quran, do not come near adultery, for it's a shameful deed and evil, opening the road to other evils. Right? People talk about gateway drugs, right? So it's saying this kind of misuse of love is a gateway to other things which will, manifest other problems. Here is Judaism, not from the Torah, but from the commentary, the Talmud. What was the wicked serpent contemplating at that time? It's referring back to the kind of Genesis story, very metaphorical or kind of mythological story. He thought, I shall go and kill Adam and wed his wife, and I shall be king over the whole world. Wow. Here in Hinduism, formerly, all creatures were virtuous, and by themselves they obtained divinity. Then women, who had been virtuous became wicked witches, and Brahma filled them with wanton desires, which they in turn inspired in men. He created anger, and henceforth all creatures were born in the power of desire and anger. So these kind of problems come to us this way. Isn't it interesting how universal this is? Yeah? Yeah? One more is also from the Holy Quran. O children of Adam, let not Satan seduce you in the same manner as he got your parents out of the garden. This is again the Adam and Eve story. If you're familiar with that, I hope you are. It's kind of part of our culture, really. stripping them of their clothing in order to expose their private parts. Well, and here is Sikhism. Sexual desire is the window, pain and pleasure are the gatekeepers, virtue and sin are the gates. It kind of can go both ways, right? You see the kind of balance which is there. And again, St. Paul, flee from sexual immorality. He who sins sexually sins against his own body. So it's not only damaging somebody else, it's also damaging you. It's your, what should be a holy temple, in which is your kind of first foundation of peace as an individual, with your mind and body working together as we described. But you're violating that. You're actually setting it at odds and bringing that conflict into yourself. So I referred already to this Genesis story. I just focus a little on this because this is, a source of many insights, important insights for Father Moon when he was really prayerfully researching this. What's the root of this problem? He prayed desperately for a period of about 7 years as a young person from his kind of first encounter with vision of Jesus when he was 15. And he really set out on a journey, asking himself and not being satisfied until he got to the root of this problem. So maybe you're familiar with the Genesis story, which talks about 2 trees in the Garden of Eden, and the first ancestors are there, and it's a serpent which says to them, eat the fruit. They've been told, but God's word to them is, do not eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall die. There's a prohibition to eating that fruit, which is, has a penalty of death associated with it. So, it's a very confusing story to many people. Many people make a distance from that, even, faithful Christians, because they feel, well, that's just mythological. Maybe it says something about disobedience. We shouldn't disobey God. But, if our first ancestors just disobeyed God, why should everybody be punished from thence on? It raises many difficult questions. Well, I'll go straight to the kind of explanation that Father Moon found after his long search, that this fruit that's talked about, anyway, it sounds a bit of a metaphorical tree, doesn't it? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's not a literal fruit. This is referring to not a test of obedience. It's something more desirable than life itself, because they were tempted to eat it, even with the threat that they would lose their, at least spiritual life. So it's portrayed as something very essential to fulfilling life's goal. And the answer that came to him was, yes, it's love itself. This is why we talked about love earlier, right? It's love itself. Especially, it's referring to the holy husband-wife relationship, which should be held in such a precious way and guarded so preciously. And that, of course, chimes with all those explanations which we had from the different religious traditions, doesn't it, right? It means that's our problem area as human beings. It was in the beginning, and it manifests as problems today. Don't we see it in our culture? This is often the root of problems or somebody's downfall. It's the misuse of love. Well, tree of knowledge of good and evil. To know, in biblical terms, is to have sexual relations, right? It's used that way as a kind of euphemism, I suppose, right? Not in front of the children kind of thing, right? So you have in the Christmas story, which is replayed in many, many primary schools at Christmas, right? You have it saying that Joseph was betrothed to Mary, the mother of Jesus. He was engaged to Mary, but he did not know her. He didn't know her. Well, he must have known her. He's engaged to her. They're coming on the stage together, right? But this is what it means. It means they didn't have any sexual relationship. So it's used that way in other parts. So why not in this story when it talks about this kind of tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's bearing fruit as well, this idea of fruit. It's to produce a result. It's to pass on through lineage. It's talking about this kind of generation of human life, so bearing fruit. Is that good fruit or is it bad fruit? What's going into that process? So here in Father Moon's understanding, our first ancestors were on the way to their spiritual maturity, and that is kind of looking at their own individual first blessing or first foundation for happiness. But something went wrong at that point, maybe in their teenage years. They were knocked off this path by the power of unprincipled love. They experienced love where they shouldn't. They didn't wait to be spiritually mature before entering into marriage. So they were given a prohibition: do not eat, do not engage in that relationship, and it's given for their own protection. It's given to actually help perfect love and to be free to love in the future without any complications. So, once married and blessed in marriage, they would be free to eat, in the metaphorical use of the word. Are you with me? Okay. Did you expect this on a Saturday afternoon after your beautiful sandwiches? Sorry, but that caused what we call human fall. Something went wrong. Some kind of self-centered element entered in to the love which we share and pass on generation to generation. It's like a corruption of love itself. Does that make sense? So that is what we have to undo. That's what we have to unlock. Father Moon is saying here, this is back in 1995, what's the reality of our world today? Well, it's disorder and sickness of every kind, including war, violence, and drug abuse. These have infected humankind. But more important, the rapid collapse of sexual morality among the young, the increasing divorce rate, the breakdown of the family, they're all destroying the foundation of human society. And all these things originate from the fall. It's connected to that explanation of the story that we've held in our hands. I don't know how many thousands of years. It's about 3,500 years at least, right? Maybe older. And it's been interpreted all kinds of ways. Personally, I think, when it was first told, people knew very well what it was talking about, right? But it's become kind of buried. Also, because in this area, even church leaders and religious leaders don't want to face up to that reality, right? Because it means we have to change our behavior. It's very serious. So, do you remember we talked about true, genuine love? I gave you one definition, amongst others: unconditionally caring about the happiness of another person. Well, conditional or false love, what we could call even imitation love, this kind of false love, one definition, again from Greg Bear, is I care how you make me feel. That's my experience of what I call love. I'm in love with this person. I care how she makes me feel. Right? If she's making me feel happy, I love her. If she criticizes me and I don't like that criticism, I don't love her. Right? This is very fickle love, isn't it? It means that always to my love, there's some kind of self-centered element. Interestingly, he says in his kind of psychology writings that even if you just feel irritated with somebody, who does that, right? Oh dear. I have judged myself when I say this, right? Even if you feel irritated by somebody, it means you don't love them with true love. Right? There's some element. You're concerned about how they make you feel. You make me feel irritated. Right? Okay, if you're really loving and they're not doing something which would irritate they're doing something which would irritate anybody, then you lovingly have to correct them, right? But not take it personally in this way. It's interesting, isn't it? It's like we have to get to the root of this problem of the misuse of love, or we will always be stuck with something less. I find the writing of Eckhart Tolle, anybody come across him? Also very interesting, spiritual writer. Here he says, what is commonly called falling in love, kind of romantic love, it's very much the spirit of our culture here, In most cases, it's an intensification of self-centered wanting and needing. You become addicted to another person, or rather to your image of that person. It has nothing to do with true love, which contains no wanting whatsoever. Wow. Huh? So, people are getting these insights, and they're teaching others in huge numbers about the problem of love, or the misunderstanding and misuse of love. So we have to tease it out, what is self-centered love and get rid of it, and what is true love and is really living more for the sake of others. Wow. So you'll remember our 3 foundations of peace that we kind of concluded with just prior to our break. Individual peace, peace in the family, and peace in society. Well, somewhere from the beginning, the pattern of these was realized. But because human nature was not original human nature, but became a fallen human nature, we realized these really as, this is mind-body conflict, and we're centered not on the highest or higher values, but on some kind of more evil or self-centered influence. And that means my mind and body becomes very self-serving. I become a selfish person. And when such a person, can you imagine if a person is still immature and rather self-centered, but they put on a very good face when they find a partner and get married, they still bring that same person that they are into that marriage. And that marriage is going to suffer because, you bring yourself with you, don't you? What am I going to give? Eventually, that's why under that kind of falseness of love, things can look very rosy in the beginning, and we're presenting a false image of ourselves very often, better than we are. But when the self-centered person that I am comes out, the other person is going to be hurt, or the children are going to be hurt, and this is how it happens. So that's why we really need to think about spiritual maturity first, and then marriage, because otherwise we're bringing our own personal problems into a situation which, unfortunately affects other people very, very seriously. And understandably, there are many reasons why people might choose to divorce, and some you have to say, well, I totally understand why, because you are living in an impossible situation, right? So that's why we see a lot of domestic abuse and violations in this area of love going on today, which further destabilizes. And actually, when encounter of love in an impure way destroys a person's trust in love itself. And it's very tragic that way, right? It's like, well, because of this experience, I'm not going to love anybody again. I'm not able to do that. And especially if a young person is violated or raped or goes through this kind of experience, it can be damaging for life. It's really serious, this area, so we have to work on that. And also, such people are those who can't create a well-balanced, harmonized environment, right? And that is why self-serving or exploitative people are damaging nature, really only thinking about lining their own pockets, right, before the future of our generations. Anyway, when we think about the results of the fall, I always kind of a little bit helped myself by this explanation from a unification principle. It's called a home study course. It says, to state that the world is under evil influences, it's not a very fashionable thing to say that, right? But to state that is to suggest that there are negative spiritual forces operating in our lives, and they're very real. Such influences can affect a person only as long as he or she cooperates with them. It's when you kind of start to have give and take with those things, or give and take centered on those kind of false values and those false ideals. Sin, what is a very kind of religious word, isn't it? Sin may be thought of as any act or thought which violates God's law and which inhibits negatively our own growth to perfection. Sin is then thus never simply against God, it's also against ourselves, in that it violates our own deepest essence. When Father Moon was praying and getting to the root of this problem, he kind of really sought to understand the process which is described in those scriptural sources, but he went way, I think, beyond that to tease out what is the root of this, what went wrong, in the spiritual and physical dimensions. And he put it this way, that we've inherited, or we have certain tendencies or proclivities that we inherited, which he calls the four fallen natures. Right? The first is not loving people as God loves them, or seeing situations as God sees them. Right? We've lost that perspective. This is why religious traditions emphasize prayer and kind of getting yourself back into that kind of zone or relationship where you can more see people from God's standpoint, or love them from God's standpoint, or see them from his viewpoint. So, this is why religion does what it does at its best. But this is our first kind of tendency, which comes from the original fall, not loving God, loving people as God loves them. The next is not neglecting our own responsibility and seeking a position and role that rightfully belongs to others. Here he's talking, teasing out certain things from the story of the archangel and Eve and Adam, these kind of aspects. The third is seeking to dominate others whom one should respect and cooperate with, behaving unrighteously and disrupting the proper order. And the fourth is seeking to justify one's own wrongdoings, to shift the blame and to encourage others to join in the same evil behavior. Now I know it's not poetry, right? But it's very, very insightful. Usually in religious traditions, sin is described in the form of concepts, right? Like the 7 deadly sins, this kind of idea, like sloth or greed or unrighteous anger or lust, or these kind of words are used, and then examples or stories are given, because much is taught through stories. But this is going under the surface of that. What gives rise to greed? What gives rise to lust? What gives rise to these kind of things? It's this aspect, these tendencies, which we've inherited from the very beginning, and we have to overcome them. Identifying, it's like a doctor's process. Identifying is a big part of the solution, isn't it, right? If you can zero in on what the problem is, you're halfway to the solution. So it's so important. Put more kind of succinctly, these are not loving from God's standpoint, leaving one's proper position, reversing the order of dominion, multiplication of evil. Do I have time just to give a little example how this might work? I don't know if any of you have worked in an office before, right? But imagine in an office, there's a kind of a promotion coming available, right? There's a place for a higher job. That means a little more pay, doesn't it, right? A little more prestige, a little more, standing. It's a lot of advantages to that in the office culture. And maybe there are 2 people who are applying for that job, right? One is saying, well, I think the best person should have the job. I'd quite like it myself, but, let's see if I'm chosen. I'll go through the whatever interview process it is, and, if I'm the right one, that's wonderful, right? But another person may have a lot of scheming coming to them, right? Can you imagine this? They might have a more self-centered viewpoint. That means, they think, I'm the best person for this job, right? Definitely, I'm the best person. So this is just starting in their mind, and nobody sees it. Nobody's influenced by that, but it's there. They're thinking already, how can I get this? So it starts in their mind. All that thinking is going on. They're neglecting their own responsibility, right? They're not doing what they should be doing. They believe themselves to be better than others, and they're that kind of self-centered person. Have you met them? Right? Always their idea is the best, and wonder why in a meeting their idea is not adopted, and they get angry if it's not. They always think they're better than others, or their viewpoint is the right one. And that's starting to get turned into action now. Maybe they go to some of the work colleagues and they spread the odd little rumor about the competitor that they have, and they say, really, do you know what she said about the boss? Or, it's terrible, isn't it, right? Yeah, I don't think she'd make a very good, a chief or whatever, So, they start doing this. They're putting somebody down to win favor for themselves, and they're trying to increase their own chances. But this is kind of rather dirty tactics, isn't it? So it's causing harm to others. The way that they put somebody down in other people's eyes will stick, because it's going to, create a bad impression. And that's not fair to that person. So they're in the process trying to get others on their side, back me up, put a good word in for me to the boss, I'll make it worth your while when I'm in this new position, all this kind of tactic. Does this go on in our society? Does it go on in our political world, do you think? What a shame, right? You've disillusioned me now, right? So you're getting others to back you up, this corrupting them in the process, and you feel justified to do this, right? Because, I am right, and I deserve this. And you're getting others to do your own dirty work. Now, written large, this is the work of dictators. This is what they do, right? But, mostly, we're not dictators, right? We're not in that kind of position. But that's the same principle. It's the same fallen nature, but it's done in huge abusive ways that really damage others. All these kind of well-known dictators, they always had food tasters. So if they're getting served a meal, they have somebody else taste the meal first. Why? So that they don't get poisoned. It doesn't matter if that person dies, but as long as I don't. This is where the self-centeredness really starts to kick in and dominate a person, and they do so much damage. They feel anybody who opposes me, I can imprison those people, or I can eliminate those people, or I can send them to a gulag and work them to death. There are people, who think this way. But our problem actually is not so much those people, although they're a problem, right? It's coming back down to myself. How much do, I kind of have these tendencies, even in a very small way. And that's what we have to think about and look at. So you'll see just by this example, this is putting those aspects of what we call fallen nature into a kind of example. And I've been a little bit joking, a little bit crude about it. But actually this self-centeredness is at work in people all the time. And we have to educate about that. We have to, expose that. Of course, and this has always been the kind of beauty of the genuine religious path, is I don't use this to go around accusing other people, right? The first person I have to look at is myself, right? In what way am I not loving others from God's standpoint? So if somebody is irritating me, what I should be doing is thinking, or even going for a quiet moment of prayer and meditation and saying, God, what do you love about this person? What is it about them? Or what is it I need to know about this person that I'm missing? And then maybe an opportunity comes up where they're talking with somebody else and they're revealing something about their life journey. And you think, wow, this person has been through so much. No wonder they're like, in the state that they are. And I was judging them and I was feeling irritated by them. But I realized I have to change my stance. I have to befriend that person, But this is why we need this kind of life. I always feel the spiritual life, it like adds another dimension to our life, which might be 3 or 4 dimensional. It adds another dimension completely. So we have a lot more movement, a lot more insight, a lot more kind of space and realm in which we can exercise love and experience the kind of truth which is out there, which otherwise is very limited. So I'm not even sure if all this is what I should be talking about, but I've probably gone on a little bit too long. Thank you very much. You're very patient, and give yourselves a round of applause, please. Thank you. Robin, I hand back to you.
Who's feeling a bit kind of after lunch? You want to? We have some drinks just outside the back door. Sorry? Yep. So we have until 2:40, so 15 minutes, just take a bathroom break and to get a drink and then be back here. So if you don't need to go downstairs, if you don't have to, there's a bathroom upstairs as well. Okay. So let's start again at 2:40. Hello, everyone. My watch is. Hello, everyone. Please take your seats. David, would you like to come up here straight away? Let's welcome Reverend Dr. David Hanna back. Let's have a round of applause for him.
Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. You're getting quite a heavy dose of me. But I hope you feel refreshed. In this third session here, we are looking at bringing peace and reconciliation. Again, looking at Father Moon's insights to this, which underpin so much of the activities and projects and things that you see, like in the videos that have been played. But also, encouraging and aware that, far beyond this movement, there are people who are doing essential work and need to do even more work. So it has to be more than just ourselves doing this. Where does peace... I think it's my wife talking very loudly. I feel responsible. It's to start at home, right? Where does this peace begin? Well, there's an interesting little quotation from the preamble to the UNESCO. It's not there, is it? Isn't that curious? Raymond, we're not getting a picture here. Thanks for pointing that out.